The Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of Nigeria. It is not the blue tropical paradise you see in postcards. Here, the water is dark. It is heavy with silt from the Niger River. It is an industrial ocean. Beneath the surface, it is a spider web of pipelines, oil heads, and cables. It is a place of immense wealth and immense danger. Ships ply these waters constantly. Massive oil tankers, nimble crew boats, and the workhorses of the sea, the tugboats. Most people never think about the men on these boats. They are invisible. They are the mechanics, the welders, the deckhands, and the cooks. This is the story of one of those invisible men, Harrison Okene. He was 29 years old. He was not a Navy SEAL. He was not a deep-sea diver. He was not an adventurer. He was a man who peeled potatoes. He was a man who worried about the price of rice in the market. He was a man who loved music. On May 26, 2013, he was about to do something that no human being had ever done before. He was about to become the longest surviving underwater prisoner in history. But before he became a miracle, he was just Harrison. To understand Harrison, you have to understand Warri. It is a city in the Niger Delta. It is a place of hustle, a place of heat. The air smells of diesel and swamp water. Life in Warri is hard. You wake up early. You fight for a seat on the bus. You fight for a job. Harrison was a survivor of this city. He was the youngest of a large family. He was quiet, respectful. In a city of loud voices, Harrison was the listener. He had a gentle face, the kind of face that made people trust him. He found his calling in the kitchen. In Nigeria, food is love. Food is status. If you can cook a good egusi soup, if you can make perfect jollof rice, you are a king. Harrison took pride in his work. He wasn't a chef in a tall white hat. He was a cook. There is a difference. A chef seeks applause. A cook seeks to feed. Harrison wanted to feed people. He got a job with West African Ventures. It was a good job, a steady paycheck. But it meant leaving the land. It meant living on the water. He wasn't a strong swimmer. In fact, he barely swam at all. Like many people in the Delta, he respected the water, but he feared it. The ocean was for fish, not for men. But the money was good. So he packed his bag. The ship was named the Jascon 4. She was a tugboat. Tugboats are the pit bulls of the ocean. They are small, squat, and incredibly powerful. They are mostly engine. The Jascon 4 was about 30 meters long. She wasn't pretty. She was covered in scuffs and rust spots, battle scars from pushing massive oil tankers. She smelled of grease, salt, and bunker fuel. For the 12 men on board, she was home. It was a tight squeeze. The cabins were small, bunk beds stacked like coffins. The hallways were narrow steel corridors. Every time the engine revved, the whole ship vibrated. You slept with the vibration. You ate with the vibration. If the vibration stopped, you woke up because silence meant trouble. Harrison's domain was the galley. It was a small stainless steel box on the main deck. Stove, fridge, sink. It was the heart of the ship. On a tugboat, the cook is the most important man after the captain. The work is brutal, heavy lifting, dangerous cables. The men come in exhausted, wet, and angry. A good meal changes everything. Harrison knew this. He knew that a hot plate of pepper soup could stop a fight. He knew that fresh bread in the morning gave them the will to work another 12-hour shift. He was the mother of the Jascon 4, May 2013. The crew had been out at sea for a while. They were a mix, mostly Nigerian, some expats. They were a family, a dysfunctional, loud, sweating family. They played cards in the mess hall. They argued about football, Chelsea versus Manchester United. The arguments would get heated, almost violent, then dissolve into laughter. Harrison would watch them from the galley door, wiping his hands on a rag, smiling. He knew their secrets. He knew who was missing their wife. He knew who was trying to save money to build a house in Lagos. He knew who liked their eggs runny and who liked them hard. There was Captain Murphy, the authority. There were the cadets, young boys eager to learn, terrified of screwing up. Harrison felt protective of the young ones. He would slip them extra meat in their stew. "Eat," he would whisper. "You need strength." The bond on a tugboat is different from a big ship. On a big ship, you can hide. On a tugboat, there is nowhere to hide. You smell each other's socks. You hear each other snore. You trust each other with your lives. If a cable snaps on the deck, it can slice a man in half. You rely on your brother to warn you. Harrison felt safe with them. The Jascon 4 was a fortress of iron. What could touch them? But the Delta is never truly safe. It wasn't just the weather, it was the pirates. The Gulf of Guinea is one of the most dangerous stretches of water on Earth. Pirates and speedboats, armed with AK-47s, would board tugboats. They would kidnap the crew for ransom. Harrison knew the drill. If the alarm sounds, lock the galley, go to the citadel, safe room. Every time he saw a small boat on the horizon, his stomach tightened. He kept a sharp knife in the kitchen, not just for onions, but the pirates were a known threat. You could see them coming. The other threat was the sea itself. May is the rainy season. The Atlantic gets angry. The swells roll in from the deep ocean, hitting the shallow continental shelf. They turn into walls of gray water. The Jascon 4 was designed for this. She had a deep hull. She could dance in the waves, or so they thought. May 25th, 2013, the day before. It was a Saturday, but on a rig, days don't matter. They were stationed at an immense oil tanker, acting as a stabilizer. The tanker was filling up with crude. The Jascon 4 was tethered to it by a thick steel cable. The sea was getting rough. The forecast said squalls. Harrison was in the galley, prepping for Sunday. Sunday was special. Sunday meant Sunday rice. Maybe some chicken, maybe some fried plantains. He wanted to make it good. The crew was tired. The tension of the rough seas was wearing on them. He peeled the yams. He chopped the onions. He hummed a gospel song. Harrison was a religious man. He read his Bible every night. He believed in Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. He didn't know how much he would need that psalm in 24 hours. Night fell. The wind picked up. The Jascon 4 began to pitch, up and down, side to side. Pots clanged in the galley. Harrison secured everything. He tied the drawers shut. He put the knives in the rack. He went to his cabin. He shared it with a few others. He climbed into his bunk. He locked the door. Crucial detail, he locked the door. On ships, in pirate waters, it is habit. You lock your door when you sleep. It gives you 30 seconds of time if boarders come. He lay in the dark, listening to the ocean slap against the steel hull. Slap, slap, boom. He closed his eyes. May 26, 2013, 4:30 a.m., the middle of the night. Harrison woke up. He needed to use the bathroom. He climbed out of his bunk. The floor was tilting. The ship was rolling heavily. He had to hold onto the wall to walk. He stepped out into the narrow corridor. It was quiet except for the roar of the engines and the wind. Most of the crew were asleep in their cabins. In accordance with safety protocol, all the cabin doors were locked from the inside. The crew was sealed in their rooms. Harrison walked to the bathroom. He was wearing only his boxer shorts. It was hot in the ship. He stepped into the small toilet cubicle. He locked the door. He was alone. A man in his underwear, in a small steel room, in the middle of a storm. Then he felt it. The ship didn't just roll, it lurched. It felt like a giant hand had grabbed the keel and yanked it sideways. The Jascon 4 was being pulled by the tension of the towing line. The heavy ocean swell hit her at the exact wrong moment. She heeled over, 20 degrees, 30 degrees. Harrison grabbed the sink. Whoa, he thought. That was a big one. He waited for the ship to right itself. Tugboats always come back. They are like corks. He waited. 1 second, 2 seconds. The ship didn't come back. It kept going. 40 degrees. Tools started sliding in the hallway. Then the sound. Not a splash, a groan. The sound of steel twisting. The sound of water rushing into vents that were never meant to be underwater. The lights flickered. Harrison's heart stopped. The world tilted past the point of no return. Gravity changed. The wall became the floor. Harrison was thrown against the door of the bathroom. And then the darkness took him. May 26, 2013, 4:35 a.m. The Gascon 4 did not sink slowly like the Titanic. It flipped. Imagine a toy boat in a bathtub being smacked by a giant hand. In seconds, the ceiling became the floor. Harrison was inside the bathroom. When the ship rolled 180 degrees, he was thrown violently across the small room. He hit the steel wall. The door of the bathroom, which he had locked, burst open from the distortion of the hull. Or maybe the gravity pulled it open. Harrison tumbled out into the hallway. But it wasn't a hallway anymore. It was a vertical shaft. He was sliding, falling. He grabbed a door frame. The noise was deafening. Crash. Bang. Furniture, tools, plates, and bodies were being hurled around the interior of the ship. And then the sound changed. It went from the crash of solid objects to the roar of a waterfall. The ocean was coming in. The Gascon 4 was an airtight vessel, but only if the hatches were closed. When she capsized, water rushed into the ventilation shafts, the open hatches, the engine intakes. The pressure of the Atlantic Ocean punched its way inside. Harrison felt the water hit him. It wasn't a trickle. It was a fire hose. It was cold, shockingly cold. It swirled around his legs, then his waist. He was in the dark. The emergency lights flickered and died. Total blackness. He scrambled. He didn't know which way was up. His internal gyroscope was broken. He tried to stand, but the floor was tilted at a crazy angle. He crawled. He was moving on instinct. The lizard brain took over. Find air. Find air. He felt his way along the steel walls. He knew the layout of the ship blindfolded. He had cleaned every inch of it. But now, everything was wrong. A door that should be on the left was on the right. A ladder that should go up went down. He was a rat in a maze that had been shaken by a god. He wasn't the only one awake. As the water rose, he heard them, his friends, his brothers. They were trapped in their cabins. Remember, they had locked their doors for safety against pirates. Now, those locks were their death warrants. With the ship upside down, the doors were jammed by the pressure or the angle of the hull. They couldn't get out. Harrison heard them pounding on the steel doors. Bang, bang, bang. He heard their voices. Open, open, help me. Jesus, Jesus, Harrison screamed back. I'm here, I'm here. But he couldn't do anything. The water was rising fast. It was at his chest, then his neck. He was being swept along by the current of the flooding water. He was pushed down the hallway, away from the cabins. He heard the screams get wet, gurgling, and then silence. One by one, the pounding stopped. The voices were extinguished. It took less than 5 minutes. 11 men drowned while Harrison listened in the dark. He was the last soul left alive. The ship was heavy. The engines dragged her down. She sank, down through the water column, 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. She hit the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Thud. The impact threw Harrison against a bulkhead. He swallowed water, salt water, oil, debris. He coughed. He sputtered. He was floating in a pocket of water inside a room. He reached up. His hand broke the surface. Air. He gasped. He had found a pocket. But the water was still rising. It was chasing him. He scrambled onto something floating. A mattress? A wooden panel? He pushed himself higher. He found himself in the officer's toilet, an adjacent bathroom to one of the cabins. He climbed onto the toilet bowl, then onto the sink. He pressed his face against the ceiling, which was actually the floor of the deck above. He breathed. The water lapped at his chin. He waited for it to cover his nose. He waited to die. He prayed. God, make it quick. But the water stopped. Why did the water stop? Physics. Boyle's law. The ship was upside down. Air was trapped inside the hull, like a glass turned upside down in a sink. As the ship sank, the water pressure increased. At 30 meters depth, the pressure is 4 atmospheres, approximately 60 pounds per square inch. This pressure compressed the air bubble. It squeezed the air into a smaller and smaller space. But the air pushed back. Once the pressure inside the bubble equalized with the pressure of the water stopped rising. Harrison was sitting inside a bubble of compressed air. It was a miracle of engineering. If the ship had settled on its side, the air would have escaped. If the hull had ruptured, the air would have escaped. But the Jascon 4 had settled perfectly upside down, creating a diving bell. Harrison didn't know the physics. He just knew that he had a few feet of air above his head. He was alive, but he was buried alive. Harrison took stock of his situation. He was in total darkness. He was wearing only his underwear. The water was freezing. The temperature at the bottom of the ocean is about 4 degrees Celsius, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the ship, it was slightly warmer because of the residual heat from the engines, but it was cooling fast. Harrison was shivering violently. Hypothermia was the immediate enemy. If he stayed in the water, he would die in hours. He needed to get out of the water. He felt around in the dark. He was in the officer's bathroom. He reached out. He felt a wall, a sink. He felt a workspace. He realized he was near the officer's bedroom. He splashed through the dark, keeping his head in the air gap. He found the cabin. There were floating objects everywhere. He found a mattress. He pulled the mattress onto a shelf or a platform. It's hard to tell in the dark, but he created a raft. He climbed onto it. He was out of the water. Just his feet were dangling in. He hugged his knees to his chest to conserve heat. He sat there, shaking, waiting. He could feel the depth. His ears were popping constantly. The air felt thick. Breathing compressed air is different. It feels heavy in the lungs. Your voice changes. It sounds squeaky, like you inhaled helium, the Donald Duck effect. Harrison tried to speak. "Is anyone there?" His voice sounded strange, high-pitched. It terrified him even more. "I am losing my mind," he thought. "Even my voice is gone." The pressure did something else. It saturated his blood with nitrogen. Nitrogen narcosis, the martini effect. It makes you confused, euphoric, paranoid. Harrison sat in the dark, his brain swimming in nitrogen, trying to understand what happened. Did we hit a rock? Did a bomb go off? Is it the end of the world? The silence was the worst part, but it wasn't truly silent. The ocean is noisy. The ship was groaning. Metal under 4 atmospheres of pressure creaks, creak, pop, groan. Every time the metal popped, Harrison flinched. "It's collapsing," he thought. "The bubble is going to burst." He heard something else. Fish. Scavengers. He heard movement in the water below him. Were they sharks? The bodies of his friends were floating somewhere in the ship. The thought of what was happening to them made him weep. He cried in the dark. "Why me? Why am I the only one?" Survivor's guilt washed over him. He was the cook, the least essential man on the crew. The captain should have lived. The engineers should have lived. But God had saved the cook. Time stopped. Harrison was in a timeless void. He had no watch. He had no view of the sun. He measured time only by the shivering. The cold was relentless. The water temperature was slowly leaching the heat out of his body. Even though he was out of the water, the air was damp and cold. He was shivering so violently that his teeth chattered like a machine gun. He knew he had to conserve heat. He looked around the cabin in the dark. He found wall paneling. He ripped the panels off the wall. He stacked them on top of the mattress to create a higher platform, further away from the black water. He curled into a ball, the fetal position, the primal shape of survival. He tried to think warm thoughts. He thought about the kitchen, the heat of the stove, the steam of the rice. He thought about the sun in Wari, but the cold was inside his bones. Hypothermia makes you sleepy. It tells you to close your eyes. Just sleep, the cold whispers. It won't hurt. Harrison fought the sleep. He knew that if he slept too deep, he might roll off the mattress. He might roll into the water, and if he hit the water while asleep, he would inhale it. So he dozed, a half sleep, a vigil. The cold was an enemy he could feel, but there was another enemy he couldn't feel: carbon dioxide, CO2. Harrison was trapped in a sealed bubble. Every time he exhaled, he released CO2. In a small space, CO2 builds up. It is an invisible killer. As the levels rise, it poisons the blood. It causes headaches, confusion, panic, and eventually, unconsciousness. Harrison started to feel it. His head pounded, a dull, throbbing ache behind his eyes. He felt breathless, even though he was sitting still. He found himself panting, like he had just run a race. He didn't know it, but he was slowly suffocating in his own exhaust. The air pocket was shrinking, not in size, but in quality. He was breathing recycled death. 24 hours passed. The adrenaline faded. Now, the needs of the body took over. Thirst. He was surrounded by water, millions of gallons of it, but he couldn't drink a drop. The salt water would dehydrate him faster. His throat was dry as sandpaper. His tongue felt swollen. He started to hallucinate water. He saw bottles of Fanta. He saw cold sachets of pure water, common in Nigeria. He reached for them in the dark, but his hand touched only wet steel. He licked the moisture off the walls. It was salty. He stopped. He realized he was in a test of discipline. If I drink the sea, he told himself, I die. So he sat, parched. A man dying of thirst in the middle of the ocean. The nitrogen narcosis was getting worse. The high pressure was messing with his brain chemistry. He started to hear things, not just the ship noises. He heard voices. He heard his wife. He heard his pastor. He had vivid, lucid dreams while he was awake. He saw himself at his own funeral. He saw his mother crying. He felt a presence in the room with him. Was it the spirits of the crew? He spoke to them. Are you there? Don't leave me. But the only answer was the splashing of the water. And the splashing was terrifying. He heard large splashes nearby. He knew what it was. Sharks? Barracudas? Something was feeding. The thought paralyzed him. He imagined a shark swimming up into his air pocket, grabbing his leg and dragging him down into the dark. He pulled his legs tighter to his chest. Harrison was not a man of science. He didn't know about Boyle's law or nitrogen narcosis. He was a man of faith. When the mind breaks, faith is the only glue left. He started to recite the Psalms. He knew them by heart. Psalm 54. Save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy strength. Psalm 88. Let my prayer come before thee. Incline thine ear unto my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draweth nigh unto the grave. He chanted them, over and over. It became a mantra, a rhythm. It gave him something to do. It kept the panic at bay. He made a deal with God. "Lord," he whispered, "if you get me out of this, I will never go to sea again. I will serve you. Just don't let me die in this dark." He felt a strange calm wash over him. He decided that he was not alone. He believed God was in the air pocket with him. Hour 48. Harrison was weak. He was fading. The CO2 was putting him to sleep. He was ready to let go. Then, a sound. Clang, clang, clang. It wasn't the ship settling. It was rhythmic. It was metal hitting metal. Harrison sat up. His heart hammered against his ribs. Was it rescue? Or was it his mind playing tricks again? He listened. Clang, clang. It was getting louder. It was coming from the hull. Someone was out there. Someone was knocking on the tomb. He grabbed a piece of metal, a pipe, or a tool he found. He banged back. Bang, bang, bang. He screamed, "I'm here, I'm here." He waited. Silence. The hammering stopped. Did they hear him, or did they move on? He didn't know that on the surface, divers were working, but they weren't looking for survivors. They were looking for bodies. The Jascon 4 had been down for 2 days. Nobody survives underwater for 2 days. The mission was recovery, not rescue. They were expecting to find 12 corpses. They didn't know that one corpse was banging back. May 28th, 2013, hour 60. On the surface, 3 days had passed. The storm had cleared. A diving support vessel, the Toucan, was stationed over the wreck site. A team of elite divers from DCN Global had been flown in. These were not recreational divers. These were saturation divers. They lived in a pressurized chamber on the ship. They breathed a mixture of helium and oxygen, heliox, to prevent the bends. Their mission was clear, but grim. Recover the bodies. Bring them home to their families. Nobody expected survivors. The Jascon 4 was 30 meters down. It had been underwater for 60 hours. The mathematics of survival said 0. The divers suited up. They put on their heavy helmets equipped with cameras and lights. They checked their umbilicals, the thick yellow hoses that supplied them with gas and hot water. Nico van Heerden, a South African diver, was the lead man. He dropped into the green water. He descended the line. He saw the shadow of the tugboat. It was upside down, resting in the silt like a dead whale. He swam to the inverted hull. He banged on the steel. Clang, clang, protocol, just in case. But there was no answer. Harrison had stopped banging by then, exhausted. Nico swam to the open hatch. He entered the tomb. Inside the ship, visibility was 0. The water was filled with silt, oil, and floating debris. Nico's helmet lights cut a narrow beam through the murk. It was a nightmare landscape. Because the ship was upside down, the floor was the ceiling. Chairs were glued to the ceiling. Debris littered the floor. Nico had to pull himself along hand over hand. He moved slowly. His breathing was rhythmic. Hiss, click, hiss. He found the first body. It was floating near a doorway. Nico radioed the surface supervisor, the super. "I have a target." It was a cold clinical term. A target. He secured the body. He moved deeper into the ship. He was heading toward the officer's quarters. He didn't know that deep inside the ship, a pair of eyes was watching the glow of his light. Harrison was sitting on his mattress shelf. He was fading. The CO2 was clouding his mind. Then he saw it. A faint, green glow in the water below him. It moved. It got brighter. It was the first light he had seen in 3 days. Harrison's heart restarted. He knew he had to act, but he was terrified. What if he misses me? What if he turns around? Harrison knew he was in a side cabin. The diver might just swim past the door. Harrison slid off the mattress. He lowered himself into the freezing water. He took a breath. He submerged. He swam toward the light. Nico Van Heerden was swimming down a narrow corridor. He saw something in the silt. A hand. A pale, waterlogged hand waving in front of his camera. Nico thought it was another body. The current often makes corpses move. He reached out to grab the hand, to secure the target. As Nico's gloved hand touched the pale hand grabbed back. It squeezed his fingers. Nico froze. He recoiled in pure shock. "He's alive!" Nico screamed into his comms. "The hand! It's holding me! He's alive! He's alive!" On the surface, in the control room, the supervisor jumped out of his chair. "What? Say again, Nico." "I have a survivor. He is holding my hand." It was the scariest moment of Nico's life, followed instantly by the most miraculous. Nico looked past the hand. He saw a face rising out of the water. Harrison Okene, eyes wide, gasping for air. He looked like a ghost, but he was breathing. Nico surfaced into the air pocket. He looked at Harrison. Harrison looked at this alien creature in a yellow helmet and a robotic suit. Nico raised his hand. He gave the OK sign. Harrison gave the thumbs up. Then Harrison broke down. He started to wail. "Thank God! Thank God!" Nico keyed his mic. "I've got him. He is conscious. He is okay." The super on the surface was stunned. "Okay, Nico? Calm down. Slow down. Ask him his name." Nico approached Harrison. He patted Harrison on the shoulder. A human touch. "What is your name?" Nico asked. But when Nico spoke, it sounded like a cartoon. Because of the helium mix in the diver's gas, his voice was high and squeaky. "What is your name?" Harrison didn't care that his savior sounded like Donald Duck. "I am Harrison," he rasped. "The cook." The euphoria faded quickly. The supervisor on the surface, Colby, realized the danger. Harrison had been under pressure for 60 hours. His body was saturated with nitrogen. If they just pulled him to the surface, the nitrogen would bubble out of his blood like a shaken soda can. The bends. It would kill him instantly. They needed a plan. "Nico," the super said, "do not bring him up. Stay with him. We are sending support. Check the air." Nico checked the air in the pocket. He looked at his sensors. CO2 is high. Oxygen is low. He is lucky to be alive. Another few hours and he would be dead. Nico pulled out his emergency regulator. He put the mask on Harrison's face. "Breathe this," Nico gestured. Harrison took a deep breath of pure heliox. It was sweet. It was clean. His headache started to fade. Nico pulled out a bottle of hot water, used to heat the diver's suit. He poured it over Harrison's shivering body. He gave him a thumbs up. "We are going home, brother," Nico said. "But not yet. We have to wait." They needed to move Harrison. The air pocket was toxic. They needed to get him to the diving bell, a pressurized capsule that would take him to the surface. But to get there, Harrison had to swim underwater. He couldn't hold his breath. The pressure changes would burst his lungs. They needed a helmet for him. A second diver, Andre, arrived. He carried a spare KMB helmet. It was heavy, bulky. They explained to Harrison with hand signals. "Put this on. Breathe. Trust me." Harrison was terrified of the water. He had just spent 3 days hiding from it. Now they wanted him to put his head back in it. But he looked at Nico. He trusted the alien. He nodded. They lowered the helmet onto his head. They locked the neck dam. Harrison took a breath. Hiss. Air. He was now a diver. "Okay, Harrison," Nico said in his squeaky voice. "Follow me." They dropped down into the black water. Harrison left his tomb. He swam through the corridor where his friends had died. He didn't look back. He followed the yellow umbilical cord toward the light of the diving bell. Harrison was now a diver, but he had no fins. He had no training. He was wearing a 30-pound helmet and his underwear. He held on to Nico Van Heerden's harness with a death grip. They left the air pocket. They swam into the open ocean. For the first time in 3 days, Harrison wasn't surrounded by walls. He was surrounded by the infinite black of the Atlantic. He panicked. He started to thrash. Nico held him tight. "Easy, brother. Easy." They followed the umbilical cord. It was a lifeline glowing in the dark. They swam past the twisted metal of the Jascon 4. Harrison closed his eyes inside the helmet. He didn't want to see the ship. He didn't want to see if any of his friends were floating nearby. They reached the diving bell. It looked like a spaceship, a round metal capsule suspended in the water. The bottom was open, the moon pool. Nico guided Harrison up through the hole. They broke the surface of the water inside the bell. It was dry inside. They scrambled up onto the seats. The bellman, the third diver inside, helped pull Harrison up. They took the heavy helmet off his head. Harrison gasped. He breathed the air of the bell. It smelled of ozone and rubber, but it was dry. He looked at Nico. Nico smiled. "Welcome aboard," Nico squeaked. The bell began to rise, but they couldn't just open the door when they reached the surface. Harrison's body was a ticking time bomb. He had been breathing compressed air at 30 meters depth for 60 hours. His tissues were saturated with nitrogen. If they brought him straight to sea level pressure, the nitrogen would expand. Bubbles would form in his joints, his brain, and his spinal cord. It would be like shaking a bottle of champagne and popping the cork. He would die in agony within minutes. The solution? Saturation diving protocol. They had to keep him under pressure. The diving bell was sealed. Even as it was winched up to the ship, the pressure inside remained exactly the same as the pressure at the bottom of the ocean. They were bringing the bottom of the sea up to the surface. Harrison looked out the small porthole. He saw the water turn from black to green to blue. Then he saw the sun. It filtered down through the water. He started to cry again. "The sun," he whispered. "I never thought I would see it." The bell docked with the decompression chamber on the deck of the Harrison. The chamber is a long steel tube about the size of a shipping container. It is the home of the saturation divers. Because the pressure inside the bell matched the pressure inside the chamber, they could open the hatch and crawl through. Harrison crawled into the chamber. He was greeted by the other divers. They looked at him with awe. To them, he was a legend, the man who refused to die. But he was also a medical emergency. They put him in a bunk. They checked his vitals. They gave him fluids. They gave him food. It was his first meal in 3 days. He didn't want steak. He didn't want caviar. He wanted a kamu, pap, and milk. Comfort food. The divers didn't have Nigerian pap, but they gave him porridge. He ate it slowly. It tasted like life. The irony of Harrison's rescue was this. He had been trapped in a steel box underwater for 60 hours. Now, he was trapped in a steel box on the surface for another 60 hours. That is how long it takes to decompress safely from saturation. The pressure in the chamber was lowered painfully slowly. If they went too fast, Harrison would get the bends, so they sat there, Harrison and the divers. They played cards. They watched movies on a laptop. But Harrison couldn't focus on the movies. He kept asking the question the divers were dreading. "The others?" Harrison asked. "Did anyone else make it?" Nico looked at the floor. "No, Harrison. We searched the whole ship. You are the only one." Harrison turned his face to the wall. The survivor's guilt hit him harder than the nitrogen. "Why me?" he sobbed. "The captain had a family. The boys were so young." "I am just the cook." The divers sat with him in silence. They didn't offer platitudes. They just let him weep. In that small steel tube, the bond between the Nigerian cook and the international divers became unbreakable. They were his guardians. While in the chamber, Harrison had a phone patch to his family. His wife, Akpavona, had been told he was dead. The company had sent the list of the missing. She was mourning. Then the phone rang. "Hello?" "Baby," Harrison said. She didn't believe it. "Who is this?" "It's me, Harrison." She dropped the phone. She screamed. But there was a problem. Because of the helium in the chamber, Harrison still sounded like Donald Duck. His high-pitched, squeaky voice was confusing, but she recognized the laugh. She recognized the nickname. "I am alive," he said. "God saved me." It was the most beautiful, hilarious, tear-filled conversation in history. A man sounding like a cartoon character, explaining that he had returned from the grave. June 1st, 2013. The pressure gauge on the chamber finally read 0, sea level. The hiss of the gas stopped. The heavy steel door was unlatched. Clank, hiss. It swung open. Harrison hesitated. He had been in a box for nearly a week. He stepped out onto the deck of the Harrison Okene. The air hit him. It was hot, humid. It smelled of salt and diesel. It was the smell of the Delta. He looked up. The sky was blue. Clouds were drifting. He fell to his knees. He didn't kiss the ground. He raised his hands. "Thank you," he screamed at the sky. The crew of the ship was lined up. Roughnecks, welders, sailors. They were cheering. Some were crying. They clapped as he walked down the gangway. He was wrapped in a blanket. He was thin. His skin was peeling from the water exposure. But he was walking. He was the man who beat the Atlantic Ocean. They took him to the hospital in Wari. The doctors were amazed. Physically, he was in rough shape. He had skin lesions from the salt water. He had mild dehydration, but his lungs were clear. His heart was strong. The nitrogen had cleared his system, but the psychological scars were just beginning to form. That night, in a soft hospital bed, Harrison couldn't sleep. He turned off the lights. Panic hit him. The darkness. He felt the water rising. He heard the groans of the ship. He turned the lights back on. He grabbed the nurse's hand. "Don't leave me alone," he begged. "I can't be in the dark." For months, he would sleep with the lights on. He would wake up screaming, thinking he was back in the bubble. PTSD is the tax you pay for survival. Survival is a gift, but it is a heavy gift. Harrison Okene walked out of the hospital, but he walked into a world of grief. 11 families were preparing for funerals. The bodies of his crewmates, the men he laughed with, the men he cooked for, were recovered by the divers. Harrison attended the funerals. It was the hardest thing he ever had to do. He stood by the graves. He looked into the eyes of the widows and the mothers. They didn't hate him. They hugged him. But he could see the question in their eyes. Why you? Why the cook? Why not the captain? Why not my son? Harrison didn't have an answer. He asked God the same question every day. Why did you save me? He felt a deep responsibility. He realized that his life was no longer just his own. He was living for 12 men. He had to make it count. For 2 years, Harrison stayed on dry land. He refused to go near the ocean. Even a swimming pool terrified him. If he took a shower and the water hit his face, he would flash back to the moment the ship capsized. He worked small jobs. He tried to cook again, but the kitchen reminded him of the Jascon 4. He felt lost. He was the miracle man, the guy from the news. But inside, he was broken. He knew he had to face the monster. The ocean had tried to kill him. It had taken his friends. If he spent the rest of his life running from it, the ocean would win. He made a decision that shocked everyone. He didn't just want to go back to the water. He wanted to go under it. Harrison Okene signed up for diving school, not just scuba lessons, commercial diving school. The same training that Nico Van Heerden, his rescuer, had gone through. His family thought he was crazy. The water almost ate you once, they said. Why go back? Because I need to know, Harrison said. I need to understand what happened. He struggled at first, putting on the mask, submerging. The panic was always there, scratching at the back of his throat. But he pushed through. He learned the physics of Boyle's law, the law that had saved his life. He learned about nitrogen narcosis. He learned how to rescue others. He graduated. Harrison Okene, the cook who couldn't swim, became a certified IMCA Class II commercial diver. He put on the helmet. He put on the suit. He went back to work at sea, not peeling potatoes, but fixing pipelines. It was the ultimate victory over trauma. He didn't just survive the deep, he mastered it. One day, Harrison met Nico Van Heerden again, the diver who had found the hand in the dark. They hugged. Nico looked at the diving badge on Harrison's chest. He shook his head in disbelief. "You are a brave man, Harrison," Nico said. "Braver than me. I dive because I love it. You dive because you beat it." They remain friends to this day, the alien and the cook, bound by a handshake in the dark. Scientists will tell you that Harrison Okene survived because of physics, because the ship capsized at a specific angle, because the air pocket was exactly 4 feet high, because the water pressure stopped just before it drowned him, because the carbon dioxide levels didn't reach a fatal concentration until the 60th hour. It is a mathematical equation of luck. But Harrison doesn't care about the math. He cares about the psalm. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. He walked through the valley of the shadow of the Atlantic. He sat in a tomb for 3 days, and he came back. The story of the Jascon 4 is a tragedy. 11 men were lost. But it is also a testament to the stubborn, unbreakable will of the human spirit. We are designed to survive. We are designed to hold on to the last breath of air. And sometimes, when we reach out into the darkness, something reaches back.